I don't have much left. We were talking about suffering. Uh, in the New Testament, Paul writes more about suffering, I think, than anyone else. If you want to learn and try to understand suffering, 2 Corinthians is a good place to go to get some knowledge. Uh, Comfort during times of trouble is what Paul begins speaking about in the first of the chapter. He also teaches us that there are advantages to troubles in the world, and I think it's a very profitable lesson to understand. For me, it made dealing with things much easier. Understanding that there's potential value to difficult times. First of all, we've talked about before, just a reminder, these troubles test the validity of our faith. How much faith do I have? No one knows until faith is put to the test. We think we know, we feel like we know, and that's all honest. I mean, there's nothing deceptive about that at all. But the truth of the matter is, you don't know until your faith is put to the test. Then you find out how much faith you have. And sometimes we're disappointed with what we see. We felt like we were more confident, more trusting in God than what we are. And it makes us sad, but it shows us where we need to strengthen ourselves. We need to resolve to increase our faith and go forward. So there's an advantage that we see our faith, or the lack thereof. Secondly, this troubles in life weans us of the things of the world. All of us, all of us who are older, we know better than we've ever known in our whole life what's important in life. When I was young, a lot of things I thought was important, and today I don't even think about it at all. It doesn't matter anymore. Everything that you have, it's here today, gone tomorrow, and so what? But as you get older, I think we start to appreciate that more, understand it more. And probably because we've had a lot of experience at having to say goodbye to people we love, and having to give up things that we've loved. Between the two, we learn what's really important in life, and it's not the toys. That all changes. Third, the understanding that God calls his people to their heavenly hope. The death of a saint is a precious thing, we're taught in the 116th Psalm, verse 15, I believe. Precious thing. What makes it precious? A child going to be with their father. That's what makes it precious. A sick body that's you can't bother you anymore. The troubles, the bad days, difficult days, that's all of now a thing of the past. There's no more suffering. There's no more tears. There's no more crying. It's a new world. It's a new life. It's a new beginning. And we don't feel that way because we feel lonesome. You know, we have a great big absence in our life all of a sudden. But for the person who passes, and we think on these things, about the ones we love especially, and, you know, we say, well, they're better off now. And they are much better off than what they were before. The Father wants his children to come home. And every time one leaves us, it's another reminder of the brevity of life and the ambition of life as well. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 17 and 18, one of my pet favorite passages are light affliction, which is, but for a moment, it's just a short little thing. It is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Whenever we're going through a problem, it's never short, is it? And it's never a light affliction. It's a big deal. It's a major deal. As we're living through a problem, whatever sort it may be, and depending on the degree of the problem, it's always to us the biggest thing in the world going on in our life. And I guess that's only natural. We'd feel that way. But when we get on the far side of it and we get to look back, it doesn't seem as bad with time. It seems less problematic than it was during the time. And probably the most common thing we hear about is women having a baby. During delivery, it can be a very challenging time. But then, the farther mom gets away from delivery, the less delivery seemed to be an obstacle. Things change as we move away from the event. And it wasn't as momentous as we thought it was. It didn't last as long as we thought it did. And we grow to learn that through our experiences. And we do not look to things which are seen, the things that are around us. I like cars. I got a Camaro car I like pretty good. And when I have a bad week like last week is a bad week. I didn't think about that car not one time. Never crossed my mind. I didn't care about that car. It's on its own this week. You got to feel pretty good to care about it. We learn not to look at those things. Why? It don't seem important. Not now, not today. We do not look at those things which we see with our eyes, but instead we look at the things which we cannot see. We look beyond the veil. That's what I do a lot. I look beyond and see goodles of people who have blessed us over the years. And it looks good, huh? And it's very uplifting to think about people we love, admire, respect, enjoying good things. It's very comforting that we have that. No, we don't look at that old Camaro out in the carport. We look at the good things, the things that we can't see with our eye, at least not yet. But the things which you're seeing, well, these are only temporary. Somebody else going to wind up with that car. I know that. But all those folks on the other side of the veil, one day we'll be with them. We'll be right there in the midst of them, doing whatever it is they do over yonder. And it'll be that way forever and ever. Amen. For we know, in chapter 5, verse 1, we know, we've been taught that our earthly house, this body, this tent, once it's destroyed, we have another house. It's a building made by God this time. It's a house not made with hands, and it's an eternal house, and it will be in the heavens. We get out of the temporary abode, and we move into the permanent one. I think one of the types in the Old Testament was, you remember, Old Testament Israel, they lived in a tent. The tabernacle was in a tent. And then under Solomon's oversight, the temporary dwelling, was replaced with a structure, the temple. Temporary versus what looked like permanent, at least. And so a type of the temporary body, housing, dwelling place, as opposed to the permanent dwelling place, the spiritual body, which will never grow old and will last forever and ever. Fourth, problems help us discover what it is we really love. I knew a man one time that wasn't faithful to his wife most of the time. And he got sick. And his wife, man, she took care of him. Waited on him hand and foot. And he told me that during that time, he realized how much he loved her. Realized how much she loved him and how much he loved her in return. And he did an about face. He got well, and when he got well as he could get. When he got well, he was good to her. About like he was trying to make up for all the bad he had done. Sometimes we find out what we really love during times of suffering in various ways. It brings us to our senses, brings us to reality. I don't know, stories can go 100 different ways, but we will find out what it is we truly love. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 2, Paul will say, God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Peter said, rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. In Romans chapter 5, verses 3 and 4, Paul said, we also glory in tribulations because of what we know. What is it we know, Paul? We know that tribulation produces perseverance, stick-to-itiveness. Perseverance produces character. And character is what gives us our hope. We grow, we develop, and it all began with tribulations or sufferings. We discover what it is we truly love, what's really, really important in life. Sometimes the things that seem so important become much less important when a person suffers. And we grow in different ways, depending on the individual. In Acts chapter 5, verse 41, I can remember when I would read this, and I wondered if it was really true. I mean, I couldn't believe it. It seemed so phony. And I had serious doubts about statements like this. They departed from the presence of the council, the apostles, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for the name of Jesus. As far back as I can remember, when I read this, I didn't believe it. Daddy whooped me a lot of times in my life, and not one time did I ever rejoice. I mean, never. I was always sad. I mean, I didn't understand the Bible at all. And when I knew it was supposed to be all true, But when I read this and other passages like it, I thought, I don't believe that. It just don't seem right that somebody would rejoice over the suffering. But when you understand suffering and what it means, the apostles, they had enough knowledge by this time. They understood that they were suffering just like Jesus suffered. They were suffering because they were like Jesus. The suffering was proof, evidence, if you will, that they were the disciples of Christ. They were vindicated by the suffering they had to endure, the beating. And they thought that was a good thing. I can understand that now. I didn't even think about it that way back in the day. But when I think about it now, I know what was going on. And now it makes sense to me why people would rejoice during a time of suffering such as this. When you suffer for righteousness' sake, it's evidence. The reason I am beaten, Peter might think, was because I'm like Jesus, and they beat him too. So that would be a positive thing rather than a negative. Sacrificing Isaac revealed Abraham's love for God. Well, we've probably all been stirred by this one. Offering his son. There's another one I couldn't believe back in the beginning. Would a man really offer up his son? Well, I've never had God talk to me, so I can't really answer that question. But I didn't think it was who would do that. It didn't make sense to me. Well, I learned later, of course, that a person who trusted God would do it, because even though they don't understand why God has asked them to do this or told them to do it, and it doesn't make a lick of sense to the carnal mind, I know God well enough to know that there's got to be a good reason for it, and something good going to come out of it. Only a person who had that kind of confidence or faith in God could do such a thing. But by doing it, Abraham proved, not intending to prove, but it did prove his love and devotion to God, because he did the unthinkable. And there was only one reason the man would have done that. Suffering sometimes enables us to see what it is we truly love. It enables other people to see in us what we truly love. And this is a rather unusual case with Abraham and Isaac. Genesis 22, 1 and 2, Abraham, that came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham. You reckon God would test me and you? I'm going deaf, I think. You have to speak louder.
Every day.
Yes.
Everything runs as smooth as silk at your house?
No. No. What is the Lord? Why does he test us though?
For us to learn that we need him.
There you go. That's right. It's for us to learn. The Lord doesn't learn anything, but he wants us to learn some things. Sometimes God tests us. He tested Abraham. He knew what Abraham would do. He's God. He knows everything. And he told Abraham to offer Isaac. He knew he was going to do it. Abraham didn't know it. And God wanted him to see just how much he trusted God. So he told Abraham to do it. And as you know, at the last minute, God stopped him. It was for Abraham's sake that he was tested. And the same thing is always true. Sometimes it's for our sake, so we can see a weakness in our life where we're coming up short with something we need to fix. You know, if the Lord just sat back and did nothing with us until the day of the judgment, just think of all the weaknesses we would have that we may have never identified because they don't necessarily come up all that often. But the Lord knew what our weaknesses were, and he made sure that we would see them as well. Because once I know what my weakness is, I'm in a position now that I can do something about it. I may not want to, I don't have to. But if I'm wise, when I realize I'm short in an area, I would try to strengthen myself in that particular area and improve whatever the weakness may be. We have to know it before we can repair it. So God tests us sometimes so that we can see it. And sometimes God himself does not test us. He just permits others to, like Satan. Satan has to get permission before he can mess with you. And sometimes the Lord will give him permission that he can tempt you, and he'll put restraints on him how far he can go when he has to back off, just like he did with Job. Satan, of course, his goal is to make us stumble and fall. The Lord's goal is to help us see, number one, our strong faith, or number two, where we're weak in faith. Either way, we're in a position where we can do something about it and improve our life. Testing is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. One time, Daddy and I were coming home from Detroit. He was living in a cast from his neck down to his knees. And I would haul him back and forth to Detroit in a little 66 Mustang. I had to take a piece of plywood and shove it up in the back window. And he'd lay on that plywood. One time I was coming down 75 and I nodded off a little bit. And when I did, I realized I was up on the back of a car. And I'd sit down on them brakes. And Daddy come out of that cast like a turtle coming out of his shell. I had to pull over on the interstate and get him back up in that thing. From then on, he'd always give me a little pick in the head with his cane, make sure I was still awake. But we stopped at this gas station, and he gave me some money, $10 I think he gave me. And I bought some gas back in. You fill up your car for about $4.50. And when the guy gave me back my change, he gave me the correct change, but he gave me a $10 bill with it. And I was sitting there looking at that money. Back then they pumped your gas too. I forgot that part. But I was counting the money there, and I realized it's $10 too much. And yeah, it's a lot of money back in. And I was pretty happy. I had that $10. And Daddy said, "What you got there?" I said, "The fella paid me too much money." He said, "What do you mean?" I told him, and he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to keep it." "What are you going to do?" I said, I think I'm probably going to take it back in there and give it to him. He said, "How come?" I said, well, he'll probably have to put his own money back in the till to make up for it. I don't want that to happen. So I went back in that gas station. I gave that man that $10 back. And it was hard. But Daddy, he was testing me, finding out what I was made of. He did that because he wanted to know. The Lord does it so that you and I can know, because he knows everything. That's why Abraham was tested. You know, sometimes people say, well, it doesn't make sense. The Lord did all that and nothing come of it. Why do it in the first place? It makes no sense whatsoever. That's just a failure to understand the Lord's love for humanity, his working with people to make sure that people are on the straight and narrow, and to let them make sure they're on the straight and narrow. A lot of things doesn't make sense to us, but what better way to test our faith than testing it by something that makes no sense to us, like baptizing people in water for remission of sins? I don't know how many times I've heard it doesn't make any sense. Them are the best kind of tests of all, are they not? Believers do it. Unbelievers won't. Anyway, the Lord said, take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah, offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you. All of God's promises, all of Abraham's hopes were bound up in that boy Isaac. Everything was riding on Isaac. Isaac was the child of promise. Abraham been waiting 100 years for that boy. And God was planning to build a nation on that boy. And now here they are at the crossroads. What would become of Isaac? But that didn't matter. God told Abraham to do it, and Abraham did it. He was quite a man. We learn obedience through our suffering. The psalmist acknowledged as much. In the 119th Psalm, verses 67 and 71, he said, before I was afflicted, I went astray. Before I experienced a certain suffering, a certain ailment, whatever it may have been, before that happened, I went astray, straight off from God. But now I keep your word. After the affliction, after he came back to God, he wasn't going to repeat that mistake. He concluded, therefore, it is good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. It was good. Now, when he went through his affliction, it wasn't good. He didn't enjoy it any more than you and I enjoy it. But after it was over, and after he had been redeemed again, he realized the value of his affliction, that it helped lead him back to God and back to security. And it was a very good thing. You have to grow just a little bit when we learn such lessons. Have you forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as to sons? My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. Why? For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and he scourges every son whom he receives. Chastening of the Lord isn't proof that the Lord doesn't like you. It's proof that he does. When's the last time I whooped one of your children?
When they was a camp.
Well, yeah. We can't talk about that. No, I spanked my children. My children were the ones I spanked. They were my responsibility. They were the ones that were closest to me. They were the ones I loved the most. When you have a child, if you care for that child, you must do what you have to do to teach that child what they need to know. And they can be terribly painful. Terribly, terribly painful. Sometimes people talk about being spanked being such a terrible thing. I'm going to tell you something. Back when I was a kid, if I would have been given the choice between a spanking or being grounded, I took spanking every time. You know, got a couple minutes and it's gone. You get grounded for a month and you're stuck for a month. If I would have got a vote in the whole affair, I would have took a spanking. Much more easy to get along with. But, you know, some people, they disagree with all that. But the Lord, he disciplines those whom he loves in different ways, a variety of different ways. But it's the love that makes him do it. Janie and Caden, yeah. Back when they were little kids, Janie, it's kind of like Chris and Amanda. Janie was the hard head. Caden, he just didn't want to get in trouble. And at least not with me. Janie, one day, typical Janie, she would, she'd make my head ache. It's what Avery used to do. She could make my head ache. But Janie Bell, she got hateful with Caden, BR, not as much with me, but I got tired of listening to it. And finally, I pulled the trigger and I caught her and I wore her out. And it was in a Bible class sometime later, and BR was teaching the class, and her grandma used to say, you don't whoop a child because you hate him, you whoop him because you love him. And BR used that statement on them kids. And Caden said, boy, Uncle John must love Janie a whole lot. Whom the Lord loves, he chastens. He scourges every son whom he receives. It's a proof of love, not hate. A world mind won't understand things like that, but we do. We understand. If you endure chastening, God's dealing with you like he does anyone would a son of his love. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? Back then it was pretty natural. You know, it wasn't like today where they put you in jail for it. Back then it was kind of a natural thing to do. But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, all children, especially the children of God, if you're a son or a daughter of God, you will be chastened. It may not be taken to the woodshed, probably will be a few times, but it's going to be a lot. You may get grounded for a month, I don't know. But we all are chastened by the Lord. That's God trying to straighten us up. He's trying to make sure we get to go to heaven when we leave this place. Then you are illegitimate and you are not sons. If the Lord doesn't chastise you, it's because you're not a child of his. That's why I never whooped your children. It wasn't my place to do that. And God won't whoop you know whose children. Furthermore, we've had human fathers who corrected us. We've paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? I submitted to my daddy. Doesn't it make only good sense that I would submit to my Father God? They indeed for a few days chastened us as seemed best to them, our daddies. But God does it for our profit, knowing what's good for us, that we might become partakers or sharers of his holiness. We may learn what holiness is. Now, no chastening seems to be joyful for the present. That's what I said a little while ago. I never rejoiced when I suffered. It just wasn't something I was given to do. And now Paul's agreeing with me. No chastening seems to be joyful for the present moment, but painful. And it is painful. It's not fun. You got to be honest about these things. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. It doesn't feel good when we're going through it, but later, when we look back and we see the value of what happened to us, then we can feel some type of consolation for the time we spent suffering. The sixth thing I got on my little list, the Lord reveals his compassion through the troubles we experience in the world. He oftentimes steps in because he can't bear to watch us suffer any longer. Isaiah exclaimed, "Sing, O heavens, be joyful, O earth. Break out in singing, O mountains. The Lord has comforted his people and will have mercy on his afflicted." Oftentimes in Scripture, the Lord breaks in on the suffering of his children because he just doesn't want to see it any longer. He'll bring it to a close because it's too painful. It served its purpose, whatever that may have been, but now it's time for it to stop and to leave us alone. I think probably those who aren't as hard-headed, they probably get relief from suffering quicker than the hardheads do. Takes a little longer to get through to them. I don't know if BR ever got any relief. She was so hard-headed, Alton had to stay out of her till I married her. I think he was pounding on her when we left the house one night. Do you ever wonder how much we may suffer because it's so hard for the Lord to get through to us? If God tests us, and he does, and if he tries to improve us, which he does, would it necessarily follow that if we are stubborn and bull up and hard to convince to change our way, does it stand to reason that we prolong our suffering by being so hard-headed and self-determined? What may have been a problem that could be relatively easily resolved for one person, it might take another person 5 or 10 years to learn the same lesson. I guess my point is, are we guilty sometimes of cutting off our nose to spite our face? You ever wonder about stuff like that?
Especially if you get reprimanded again, you think, yeah, I did that the first time. Do this again.
Yeah, if we're disobedient, we're just making it hard on ourselves, among the other things that we do. But when you think about it rationally, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm just making my life harder. And we do it anyway. Well, I'm going to have to quit. I want to get done. I don't know how many there are. I forgot. Hi, Kevin.